This one is heavy, folks. Get ready for a deep dive into a case of exploitation so disturbing, so horrifying, it'll really make you think about how vulnerable young people are and how the system's meant to protect them. Well, sometimes they just fail.
Yeah, and what gets me is how this case, it starts with this like universal desire for love, for someone to lean on, and then bam, it just spirals into this really dark place.
It's true, it's true. So we're hearing the story from Payal, not her real name, of course, and she briefly shared her experience in a YouTube interview. Payal's from Delhi, and she starts by describing, a pretty normal life, growing up with her mom and brother, working hard to help out the family, and then she meets Deepak.
And that's where you get pulled in, right? That need for connection, for love, especially when times are tough. It's something we can all relate to. You feel for her right away.
Totally. And at first, it seems, I don't know, almost romantic, like a whirlwind romance, elopement, the whole nine yards. But listening now, knowing what happens next, you can't help but get this sense of dread, It's like, were there red flags all along?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Looking back, the details, they raised some serious red flags. Like, Payal was only 17 when they ran off. 17, basically a kid.
Mm.
And they kept the marriage a secret. So right off the bat, you see that power imbalance, right? And it makes you question if there's even real consent. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. And then Deepak, he starts showing his true colors. Payal describes him as lazy. He starts stealing, and the worst part is the violence begins.
Yeah, that's where you see that classic move into coercive control. Remember how we talked about financial dependence?
Yeah.
It becomes a weapon used against her.
Huh.
Suddenly, Payal's trapped, emotionally, financially, the whole deal, which is sadly something we see over and over in these situations.
It's a nightmare, and that's when this other person enters the picture, Yasmin Bano. And on the surface, it's like she's offering Payal a lifeline. You can almost see how Payal would feel a sense of relief in that moment.
Oh, 100%. It's classic abuser, exploiter playbook, right?
Hmm.
They swoop in when someone's at their lowest, most vulnerable, desperate. They prey on that desperation. And we got to remember the mental manipulation that's already gone down. Payal's whole world, it's shrunk down to almost nothing. Her options seem incredibly limited at this point.
And this is where things go from bad to, well, unimaginable. Payal's pregnant. She's alone, stuck in this strange house, completely at Yasmin's mercy. And then Yasmin's son, Sahil, enters the picture.
This is where, that feeling of betrayal turns into something much darker, something sinister. Payal tells us that Sahil sexually assaults her, and get this, his own mother, Yasmin, she's filming the whole thing.
It's hard to even process the cruelty, the violation. It's almost beyond words.
It really shows you the depths of depravity that can exist in these situations.
Mm.
But we can't forget this isn't just about some kind of individual evil, right? It's about power, control, the very real threat of exposure being used to silence Payal. This young woman, so vulnerable, feeling like she has absolutely nowhere to turn.
It's truly heartbreaking. And Deepak, where's he during all of this? Was there any attempt on his part to protect her, or was he completely out of the picture?
He takes off, completely abandons her, leaves her totally at the mercy of these horrible people.
Yeah.
It's just crushing, but unfortunately it's a pattern, The abuser often bails when their victim is at their most vulnerable. It just isolates them further, reinforces the exploiter's control.
It's just awful. This was someone she looked to for help, someone she trusted, at least at some point. It's a chilling thought for anyone, but especially young people who find themselves in these situations. At this point in Payal's story, how does someone so isolated, so controlled, even begin to get help?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And sadly, there's rarely an easy answer. When the system fails to protect those who need it most, when law enforcement is actually part of the problem, that's how this kind of horrific exploitation thrives.
And it's like, just when you think Payal's story can't get any worse, it does. She describes being forced into this horrifying system, sham marriages, one after the other, and each one designed to exploit her even more.
Yeah, this is where you really see how organized this abuse is. Payal's talking about human trafficking networks, these really complex, often hidden operations, and they treat people, vulnerable people, like Payal, as commodities. It's all about coercion, manipulation, violence, whatever it takes to control them and make money. It's awful. And it's a global crisis, a global crisis. Sadly, Payal's story is just one example of how these networks operate.
It's unfathomable. Payal was forced into prostitution, and maybe the most disturbing part of all of this, the police, the very people who are supposed to protect people like Payal, they become part of the problem.
Yeah, it's chilling. The police being involved, it shows you how deep this goes, When you have people in positions of power and they're a part of it, it just creates this culture of silence, this culture of fear. It makes it that much harder for victims to come forward. They're supposed to be the protectors, and they end up being the exploiters. It's just horrifying.
Payal, despite everything she's going through, she tries to escape, finds the courage to confide in someone, hoping, praying for a way out.
That says a lot about Payal, about her strength. Even in the darkest of situations, she still had that hope, that will to break free, even knowing how dangerous it was. That takes incredible strength.
But it backfires, right? I mean, instead of finding safety, she's punished for even trying to escape.
Yeah, that's what they do. These exploiters, they use threats, they use violence to maintain that control.
Mm.
And the message is clear. Any attempt to escape is going to be met with even more pain, more suffering. It's a terrifying reality.
Payal does eventually escape. She finds her way back to her mother, but even then, she doesn't reveal everything that's happened.
Trauma does that, right? It's a heartbreaking reminder of the invisible scars these experiences leave behind.
Trauma's complicated, that's for sure. And when you're talking about someone as young as Payal, the instinct to protect your loved ones from more pain, it's understandable. It takes time, support, a feeling of safety before a survivor can really share their story.
And that makes her decision to finally tell her cousin everything. That's huge. They went to the police, but even then they face disbelief. They faced victim blaming.
It's a pattern, sadly, a pattern we see far too often. Women, victims of abuse, they face these societal biases. People are so quick to question the victim, to doubt their story rather than, actually seeking justice. It's disheartening, and it silences victims, prevents them from getting help. It's infuriating. Pale and her cousin, they had to fight to be heard, just to have their story taken seriously. They went to multiple police stations before someone finally filed a report. And even then, when this interview took place, justice was still a long way off.
Unfortunately, that's not unusual. Justice, it can take time, especially in cases of abuse and exploitation. Survivors, they deal with so many obstacles, a lack of resources, fear of retaliation, and emotionally, it's just draining, trying to navigate a system that often feels stacked against them. It reminds us how far we still have to go to create a society where survivors are truly supported and justice is a reality for everyone.
Payal's story, it's a stark reminder that this can happen anywhere to anyone. We all need to educate ourselves, challenge the harmful stuff, the norms we see every day, and fight for change, real change. What are your final thoughts? What can we learn from Payal, and how do we create a world where stories like hers, they become a thing of the past?
Payal's story, it's a powerful reminder that we can't just sit back. We can't be complacent. We have to believe survivors, listen to their stories, let them know what they went through is real, and we need to offer support. No judgment, just support. Education is key too. Understanding the signs of exploitation and abuse, recognizing the tactics, knowing how to get help, that's crucial. We got to challenge the norms that allow this to keep happening. Gender inequality, victim blaming, acting like violence is okay, it's not. And finally, we need laws, policies that actually protect people and hold the abusers accountable. Payal, her courage to come forward to share her story, it's a powerful first step. Now, it's up to all of us to act, to make a difference, to create a world where everyone can live free from fear and exploitation.
This has been a tough one, but Payal's bravery in speaking up, it forces us to listen, to learn, and to act. It's on every single one of us to challenge injustice, support survivors, and build a world where stories like Payal's, they cease to exist.